Okay, let's try again so that we have no problems with the case study. My name is Dr. Joel Rosen. Today I want to talk to you about a 20 to 40-year-old individual dealing with brain fog, anxiety, not having consistent energy, and then really being frustrated, right? Going to the doctors, being told there's no such thing as adrenal fatigue, and or doing a cortisol blood test, seeing that it was normal, and or doing a saliva test and being told that you had high cortisol, low cortisol, and just take a supplement to make it lower or take a supplement to make it higher, and not really move the needle and still not be able to deal with stress, still be anxious, still have focus issues, still not have consistent energy through the day, and still not enjoying life, right? So what I wanted to do was go over a recent test that we did on someone and give you some insights on what you could get in terms of what a Dutch test can tell you when the Adrenal Fatigue Recovery Ninja, Dr. Joel Rosen himself, explains to you how this would look. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to look at a Dutch test. And so basically, here we are. We're looking at this Dutch test. And so what I wanted to do was explain to you how I go about interpreting this. So the first thing that I do is I look at the free cortisol pattern, which this is the Dutch Complete Plus. The Dutch Complete Plus looks at a saliva sample within waking, 30 minutes later, 60 minutes later, and then it also looks at your urinary metabolites to give you an idea on how much total cortisol do you produce in that given time period, whereas the saliva only looks at the free fraction, 1%. So what's really nice about this combo test is you can get that awakening response to see if there's any challenges with that circadian rhythm, which saliva correlates very well with. But then you also get the ability to know how much cortisol are we producing for a given time period, given that the metabolites represent the majority of the hormone, whereas the free fraction is only the salivary component. So hopefully that made sense to you guys. But first thing I would say is, okay, something looks kind of odd here, right? Like we're kind of on that high end when we first wake up. We have a little bit of awakening response, but then we have this big kind of crash within 60 minutes, and then it's downhill for the rest of the day. And we'd like to see that awakening response start a little bit later, meaning if your circadian rhythm is off and your melatonin should be high at night and your cortisol should be low at night, and then in the morning when the sun rises and you have that sort of dawn set phenomenon going on where your cortisol now begins to rise, and then by the time you wake up, it wakes you up, and then within the first hour you have a doubling of your cortisol to get you ready for the rest of the day, and then it steadily declines throughout the rest of the day. You hit the pillow, fall asleep like a baby, your cortisol should be low, your melatonin should be high, and that should be happening day in, day out, right? That's what should be going on. So this kind of gives us some indications of that. We can see that his waking sample is higher than we'd like to see it before we even get started for the day. So that could be stress, it could be electronics, it could be sleep hygiene, it could be last time of the meal the night before, what's going on in your life, all those types of things I'd be looking at. And I'd also be looking at pituitary, and I'd be looking at circadian rhythm, because those are all the things that could implicate or impact that. But we got to put it all in context. Then what we do is we look at the metabolized cortisol, and we can see that the metabolized cortisol is a little bit lower in terms of relative percentage. This is at like 1 o'clock, and this is at 12 o'clock. So potentially we could have a clearance issue. We could have an HPA axis decreased issue where I would think that would be the case, where stress has been going on for a while and it feedbacks and inhibits the pituitary, and the pituitary starts to slow down the production. But you also have to think about, is the kidneys clearing it? And that's where I'd want to look at blood work and see if BUN and filtration rate and things like that are working properly. Then we'd look at your total DHEA, and we can say, hey, if this stress period has been going on for some time, and we see a feedback inhibition of the pituitary causing the pituitary hormone ACTH to decrease its signals, and the corresponding decrease in the adrenals would impact DHEA and your sex hormones. They call that pregnenolone steal, but really it's not being stolen. It's just you have a more I guess, favorable or predication to use the ACTH to make cortisol, and a less predication to make DHEA. And you don't really see that here, which is good, because if we have sort of the free fraction breaking down in terms of circadian rhythm, it's skewed, it's not breaking down, it's just maladaptive. We see some HPA axis or clearance issues, which could also implicate hypothyroid challenges or inflammation and insulin issues. Then we also see potentially a decrease in DHEA. Then I know they're really maladaptive, right? But we don't see that. We see some changes, some sort of trouble in China, but not huge challenges. But here's where we do see some challenges. We say, hey, we're still producing the prerequisite DHEA that makes testosterone, but there's a disconnect there, right? Because for his age group, we should be in the 40 to 95, he's at 34. And we would see his estrogen looks normal, but when we look at the actual estrogen values, you can see he's got high E3. So there is some aromatizing going on. Aromatizing happens when we have inflammation, insulin issues, higher body fat percentages, stress, all of those things. And that can create estrogenic type of symptoms, emotional, lack of libido. It could also be tenderness, gynecomastia, things like that. So we would want to support potentially that aromatase activity. And you can see down here, there are suggestions like chrycine, zinc, damiana, flaxseed, grapeseed extract, nettles, EGCG. Those would be things that could be really great to slow down that aromatization and preserve that testosterone. On the flip side, when we're clearing out testosterone, you can see there is an upregulation of 5-alpha, which is the more androgenic metabolite for testosterone, which could be, supportive, right? Especially if we're aromatizing and we're losing some of that libido or that oomph for that hormone that helps with oomph kind of thing. But if it goes too much, the 5-DHT could be high, and that could be problematic for prostate stuff. So the same nutrients that would be supportive for aromatizing could be supportive for the 5-alpha production too. So we really want to address the main stressors, the inflammatory issues, the blood sugar issues, things like that. We also see that his estrogen ratio in phase 1 is more favorable to 16-OH, which is more estrogenic. That could be because of genetic susceptibilities. That could be because he's aromatizing, obviously, and it's going to prefer to go down that 16-OH pathway. That could be because of candida and yeast overgrowth. And we may want to recommend in a short term, along with giving some aromatase support, we want to give some DIM or I3C, which would lower the estrogen more favorably down the 2-OH pathway, which would be very helpful because he's only at 45%, and we want to see him be somewhere in the 60 to 80%. And then we see phase 2 looks sort of in a exaggerated way. It looks like it's doing fine, but that's only because we're not really having a lot of 2H to have to clear out. Maybe if we went through some more DIM or through I3C to help clear out that estrogen away from 16-OH down into the 2-OH, he may have some methylation challenges that can really make this metabolite now not being cleared out. So very, very important thing to look at. And then lastly, the last thing that I like to look at is the cortisone-cortisol pattern. We can see that he's favorably electing to deactivate cortisol into cortisone, which I call the army reserves. Why does it do that? Typically because the body's pretty intelligent. It's under stress, it's under inflammation, it's aromatizing, its 5-alpha is upregulated. It wants to preserve the nutrients, the energy by deactivating cortisol. If that pattern were causing him problems and fatigue and issues with cortisol, I may recommend doing some licorice root, but his free fraction is fine and his metabolized is fine. If he was at the bottom of the barrel, we would maybe recommend that. Or if his free cortisol was super, super high and his deactivated cortisone was super low and we wanted to help that out, we can do some nutrients like magnolia or scutellaria, stuff like that. The last thing we would look at is just the organic acid markers. We can see that he's upregulated with his kynurenate. That could be because of GI issues, candida, excitatory mechanism, inflammation, glucose dysregulation, all the things that are causing all the other findings on here too. So just wanted to give you a quick rundown, telling you that there's a lot of things that you could be looking at besides your saliva, besides your blood work, and besides telling you there's no such thing as adrenal fatigue. In this case, he's not adrenal fatigued. He's got some maladaptive adrenals with signs of compensation where he's aromatizing his estrogen, he's not clearing out phase 1, he is having more of a 5-alpha pathway, which could be more inflammatory, and we want to support that the same way. And he has some challenges potentially with clearing out phase 2 if we're bringing more down there. The recommendations of supplements would be things like DIM, I3C short-term, things like EGCG, which is green tea extract, nettles, pygeum, antioxidants, things like that that can be really supportive. So anyways, hopefully you felt that it was really, really helpful. Reach out to me if you have any questions. We don't have any specials going on right now, but if you've done a Dutch test and you want someone to interpret it for you, we do that for $5.95. We can divide that into 2 payments, or we can do it and save you a little bit of money and do it for $5.35, and we'll give you information on what does it mean, what can you do, what are the best supplements, what are the best next tests that you should do. So if you have any questions, just email me or click on message me, and I can help you in your recovery of your adrenal fatigue or your maladaptive adrenal nightmare. Have an awesome day.